You know, there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal, not of others, but of yourself, your people and your future. For too long we have been spoken for. Our land was rich but our tables were empty. Our hands were calloused from farming, yet the grain was never ours to eat. That time is over. A few months ago I sat across the table from leaders in New Delhi. Not as a beggar, not as a puppet, but as an equal, as a brother, as a man representing the strength and soul of Burkina Faso. They looked at me, curious, maybe even skeptical. What can this small African nation offer us? They wondered. And I smiled. Because they hadn't seen what I'd seen. They hadn't walked through our fields, where the soil still sings with life. They hadn't met our farmers, our warriors of the land, who rise before the sun and sleep long after it's gone. They didn't know that we don't just grow grain, we grow resilience. And so I laid it out plain. A $14 billion grain agreement. Not aid, not charity, a deal. We produce, they purchase. Simple? On paper maybe. But behind it is a revolution. A revolution in how Africa sees itself. A revolution in how the world must now see Africa. You see, for decades, we've been exporting raw dreams and importing broken promises. The global system made sure of that. But this deal changes the rules. This is Africa writing its own terms. Now I know some people around the world are shocked. Traore did what? How can Burkina Faso negotiate such a massive deal? They ask the question like we're too small to matter. But I say, look again. This isn't just grain we're talking about. This is sovereignty. This is dignity. This is the kind of power they never taught us we could have. India didn't just sign a contract. They opened a door, a new kind of partnership. No strings, no debt traps. Just business. Fair and square. And for the first time our grain won't be shipped out at dirt prices and sold back to us in glossy packages. No. This time the value stays with us. Our farmers get paid. Our economy grows. Our youth have a reason to stay, to build, to dream right here. Make no mistake. This deal didn't come easy. There were pressures, threats, calls from the old powers asking me to slow down, to think twice, to wait. But I've learned something in this fight. If they're not uncomfortable, you're not doing enough. We didn't wait. We moved. We acted. And now the world is watching not with pity but with respect. Let me tell you something else. This is just the beginning. We've shown what's possible when we believe in ourselves. When we stop asking for permission and start making decisions. This is about more than Burkina Faso. This is for every African nation tired of being told what they can't do. We're not waiting for help. We're building our own table. The grain is just the start. So to the farmers who never gave up, to the youth who believed in change, even when it seemed impossible, to every mother and father who sacrificed so that their children might see a better day, this deal is yours. Let them be shocked. Let them talk. We'll be too busy feeding the future. What if I told you that Africa was never poor, just deliberately kept powerless, that we were never voiceless, just drowned out by noise we didn't control, that our hands have always held the keys to our own future, but we were told to wait for someone else to unlock the door. For generations Africa was framed as the continent of crisis. We were shown to the world as a people always in need, waiting for aid, for help, for handouts. They gave us loans wrapped in chains, and contracts that bled our land dry. They built systems that made our wealth their profit, our labor their gain. And they told us we should be grateful. But today I stand before you and say, that story is finished. That era is done. Africa is no longer asking for permission. We are writing our own terms. This $14 billion grain deal with India is not just a business agreement. It is a statement. A declaration. It says we will no longer be the continent of dependency. We are becoming the continent of determination, of action, of ownership. For the first time in a long time, we're not just reacting to the world, we're shaping it. This deal isn't about asking anyone to save us. This is business on equal footing. We grow, they buy, we profit, they feed their people, and no one walks away exploited. For decades, the economic model we were locked into was designed to keep us dependent. We were told we didn't have the infrastructure, the expertise, the capacity. They said we needed foreign consultants to tell us how to farm our own land. They said we needed loans to build the very roads our ancestors once walked freely. They told us our independence was political, but never truly economic. But here's the truth. Real freedom begins when you can feed yourself. Real sovereignty means you choose what to do with your resources, your harvests, your labor. And this deal is a blueprint for that future. not just for Burkina Faso, but for every African nation ready to break the cycle. This isn't theory, this is tangible. It's grain in silos, it's tractors in fields, it's contracts that don't require us to give up our ports, our power, or our pride. It's farmers getting paid what they deserve. It's youth staying in the villages and cities they were born in, because now there's opportunity right there at home. It's mothers seeing their children go to school, with full stomachs and hopeful eyes. People are shocked by this deal not because it's impossible, but because it challenges the old narrative. The world is used to seeing Africa on the receiving end of global decisions. They're not used to us being the ones setting the terms, but that's exactly why it matters. This deal was not just an economic move, it was a psychological one. It's about changing how we see ourselves. And I won't lie to you, it wasn't easy. There were voices that told me to wait, to be careful, that the world powers wouldn't like this, that there might be consequences. But my question is, consequences for who? For the system that profits when we stay quiet, for the nations that benefit when we're too afraid to stand up. Let me be clear, I'm not here to play it safe. I'm here to win back what was always ours. This deal is not the end. It is the spark. We are now looking to partner with other nations, not as beggars but as builders. Not as victims but as visionaries. We have resources. We have youth. We have ideas. And we have the will. Africa is not rising, we are returning to a place of pride, of power, of purpose, and the world must now reckon with the fact that we are not waiting to be saved. We are saving ourselves. Dependency, that chapter is closed. The era of self-determination has begun, and if this $14 billion deal has shocked the world, let them stay shocked, because we are just getting started. Let me ask you something. Why is it that countries with less land, harsher climates, and fewer natural resources are feeding the world, while Africa with its vast plains and fertile soil is struggling to feed itself? Why do others look at our land and see opportunity, but for decades we were taught to see only limitations? The truth is, they never doubted our potential. They feared it. They knew that if Africa ever truly realized its agricultural power, the global order would shift. And now it's happening. In Burkina Faso, we are done exporting raw value and importing poverty. We are no longer in the business of sending away our harvest for pennies, only to buy it back with someone else's flag stamped on the package. That era is behind us. We are reclaiming what has always been ours, our land, our labor, and our legacy. Agriculture is not just about food, it is about power. It is about economy, identity, and survival. And we have all the ingredients: fertile land, sun that shines like clockwork, water that waits to be directed, and most importantly, a people who know the rhythm of the soil better than any textbook ever could. Our farmers are not simple laborers. They are engineers of the earth, scientists of the seed. For years their efforts were ignored, their knowledge undervalued, their role diminished. They were told their farming was backward, traditional, inefficient. But let me tell you, the only thing backward was the system that refused to invest in them. That changes now. With the grain deal we've secured, Burkina Faso has stepped into a new role. Not just as a nation that grows, but as a nation that leads. We are now part of the solution to global food security. Think about that. A country once dismissed as small and dependent is now feeding millions beyond its borders. That's not luck. That's the power of agriculture finally being taken seriously. This isn't just about wheat or millet or corn. It's about building an economy rooted in what we do best. It's about creating jobs from seed to silo, from field to factory. It's about rural communities that once watched their youth leave for the cities now watching them return with tools, training, and a reason to stay. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It came from listening to our people, not foreign consultants. It came from trusting our own methods, while integrating the best of innovation. We didn't copy anyone, we created our own model. A model where the farmer is at the center, where local ownership is the rule, not the exception, and where the profits stay right here on our land. But let me be real, this wasn't just an economic move. It was a revolutionary one, because for far too long, agriculture was weaponized against us. They kept us exporting raw materials without the means to process them. They told us we were developing as long as we stayed in their supply chains, locked into low-value roles. But now we're breaking those chains, link by link. We're investing in processing plants, storage facilities, irrigation systems, and agricultural schools. not just in the cities, but in the villages, where the knowledge has always been. We are building the full pipeline from soil to export, so that Burkina Faso no longer sells grain as a favor to someone else's economy, but as a strategic move in our own. Some still ask, can Burkina Faso really become a key player in the global grain market? And I say not only can we already are. This isn't a dream, it's a decision we made. A decision to stop underestimating ourselves. A decision to bet on our strengths instead of our weaknesses. A decision to stand tall in the one area the world can't ignore, food. And let me tell you, food is the next frontier. Climate change, war and global disruption have made one thing crystal clear. Countries that can feed themselves, and others will be the ones that lead. And we are positioning ourselves exactly there. We are no longer reacting to crises. We are anticipating them, preparing for them, profiting from our preparation. The power of agriculture lies in its simplicity and scale. A seed planted by one farmer multiplied across the land can feed thousands. A single harvest, managed properly, can create hundreds of jobs. That's not charity, that's economics. This is why I believe so deeply in our farmers, because I've walked their fields, eaten their food, seen their struggle, and I will never again allow their work to be treated as invisible. They are no longer footnotes in development reports. They are the headline. They are the reason we now sit at negotiation tables, not as beggars but as equals. So when the world looks at Burkina Faso today, let them see the fields. Let them see the tractors, the silos, the women and men who wait before the sun to grow not just crops, but an entirely new future. Let them understand that we are not rich, despite being farmers. We are rich because we farm. The soil has always been ready. Our people have always been ready. The only thing missing was the belief. And now that we have that, there's no turning back. Have you ever wondered what real partnership looks like? Not a handout, not a hidden agenda, not a lecture disguised as diplomacy, but true mutual respect, a handshake where both sides walk away stronger. That's what we've built with India. That's what this $14 billion grain deal represents. Not charity, not dependency. Business, partnership, respect. For too long, Africa was brought into deals that were written elsewhere, in boardrooms and capitals far from our soil, far from our reality. They called it cooperation, but it was control. They dressed it up as support, but it came with strings so tight they left marks we still carry. This time we decided to write a new story, our own story. This time we sat at the table not with our hands out, but with our heads high. When we began discussions with India, we didn't come as subordinates. We came as equals, as a nation with something valuable to offer, something the world desperately needs. The power to grow food. India understood that. They didn't come to exploit us. They came to invest in us. They saw our potential, not our problems. And in return we gave them not promises, but performance. This partnership is not just a grain transaction, it's a declaration of trust between two nations. India needs food security for its vast population. Burkina Faso needs stable markets and fair prices for its farmers. We brought our needs to the table honestly. We listened, we negotiated, and we came out with something that works not just for one side but for both. The beauty of this deal is that it keeps the power where it belongs, in our hands. The grain we produce is ours. The land we grow it on is ours. The price we set is fair, and the profit stays in our economy. That's the difference between a deal made in partnership and a deal made in desperation. And let me be very clear, this is not about turning our backs on anyone. This is about turning our face toward opportunity, toward dignity, toward progress. India is not here to dictate, they are here to collaborate. That's the new model we must embrace in Africa. Some people have asked me, President Traore, are you sure this won't turn into another case of foreign control? And I say no, because we built it differently. Every clause in this agreement was reviewed with one question in mind. Does this protect our sovereignty? If the answer was no, it didn't make it into the deal. Simple. We learned from the past. We learned from the mines, the oil, the timber industries, where we handed away control and watched others grow rich, while we stayed stuck. This time, we said no. This time we said Burkina Faso will control its resources, its labor and its profit. This time, we make the rules.
India respected that.
They didn't flinch when we demanded fairness. They didn't walk away when we pushed back on bad terms. They stayed. They listened. That's why this deal matters. Not just for the money, but for the message. That Africa can negotiate. That we can build smart, balanced partnerships. That we know our value and won't settle for less. And let's not overlook what this means, beyond the numbers. This partnership is a model, a new blueprint for how developing nations can engage with one another without needing the approval of the old powers. South-to-South cooperation, brown hands shaking black hands, not as saviors, but as equals. That scares some people. That's why you hear the whispers, the shock, the headlines calling it bold, unprecedented. Of course they're shocked. For decades, they got used to dealing with a weaker Africa. One that signed anything, accepted anything, because we were told we had no choice. Well, we had a choice, and we made it. This deal opens the door to more partners, more leverage, more confidence. We are showing the world that Burkina Faso can lead, that we can be trusted, that we know how to manage our assets, not just for today, but for generations to come. Already we're seeing the effects. Our farmers are energized, investors are paying attention, our youth, who once believed opportunity only existed outside our borders, are beginning to see something different. A future right here, rooted in our land, powered by our choices. We've always had the raw materials. What we needed was the right mindset, the courage to demand better, the wisdom to partner wisely, and the strength to walk away from anything that didn't serve our people. That's what this deal represents. Not just grain on a ledger, but a shift in mindset. A new chapter where Africa isn't the last to be invited, but the first to be consulted. A chapter where we know our value and refuse to let anyone diminish it. A chapter where we choose our partners not by how much they promise, but by how much respect they show. India showed us respect, and we showed the world what's possible when African nations rise. Not with anger, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with purpose. This is not just a win for Burkina Faso. This is a signal to every nation across this continent. The world is ready to listen, but only if we speak on our own terms. And from now on, that's exactly what we'll do. Why do our young people feel like they have to leave home to find a future? Why must a Burkinabe farmer break his back to feed the world, yet struggle to feed his own children? Why is it that our land is rich but our people are poor? These are not just questions, they are wounds. Wounds that have been opened for too long. But I stand here today to tell you we are closing them. We are healing them, not with promises, not with speeches, but with real tangible action. With a deal that is putting money, pride and power back where it belongs, into the hands of our people. This $14 billion grain agreement is not just about trade. It is not just about contracts or commodities. It is about dignity. It is about ensuring that the sweat of our farmers finally turns into something they can touch. Better homes, better schools, cleaner water and full plates on their tables. For decades we watched as the wealth from our fields flowed outward, enriching others, while we stayed in struggle. That cycle is broken now. You see, every grain we export under this deal carries more than just calories. It carries value, and that value is staying in Burkina Faso. The days of middlemen taking the lion's share are over. The days of foreign companies owning the supply chain from our soil to someone else's supermarket shelf are ending. This time we own the process. We control the price, and we decide where the profits go. The impact is already taking root. Local farmers, once treated as laborers in a global system that never saw their worth, are now central players in a national strategy. They are being paid fairly. They are being trained, equipped, and empowered. No longer are they seen as poor villagers. They are now recognized as producers, providers, and protectors of our economy. And what happens when you put money in the hands of farmers? You build a new foundation. Roads begin to appear where there was only dust. Clinics open in places that were forgotten. Schools are built with roofs that don't leak. Markets become more than just places to trade. They become centers of life, of innovation, of community. This is not theory. This is already happening. In the provinces where we've prioritized grain production for export, you can feel the change in the air, a kind of electricity, a hope. Young men and women who once felt condemned to cross deserts or seas are now planting, planning and prospering, right here at home. They see that agriculture is no longer a symbol of poverty, but a path to prosperity. We have always said that Africa's future lies in its youth. But how can we say that, while offering them nothing but struggle? This deal changes that. It gives the youth a reason to believe in this country again. It tells them, you don't need to die in the ocean chasing a dream. Your dream is right here, under your feet. With this investment, we are making farming cool again, smart again, profitable again. And it doesn't stop with farming. With the revenue generated, we are investing in processing plants, which means more jobs in industry, We are expanding logistics, which means more jobs in transport. We are improving access to electricity, clean water and digital infrastructure, so that even the most remote areas can thrive, connect and compete. This is the multiplier effect in motion. One farmer's success becomes a builder's job. That builder's wage sends a child to school. That educated child becomes a doctor, a teacher, or maybe the next president. This is how nations grow. Not from the top down but from the soil up. And let's not forget the role of women. Our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, they have always carried the burden of both the home and the field. Now they too are stepping into the economic spotlight. With better tools, fair pay, and direct access to markets, they are becoming entrepreneurs and leaders in their own right. This is not just economic transformation, it is social transformation. Still there are those who doubt, those who say it's just a grain deal. They don't understand. This is not just about grain, this is about respect, about justice, about turning a contract into a catalyst for nationwide renewal. For the first time in a long time, Burkina Faso is not surviving, we are building, and we are not building alone. We are building with the people, for the people. That is what makes this different. That is what gives it power. You can see it in the faces of the farmers, hear it in the laughter of children walking to new schools, feel it in the determination of young workers building roads they know will lead them somewhere better. So when the world looks at this deal and asks what it means, tell them this: it means our people finally benefit from their own labor. It means our economy is no longer a pipeline that drains wealth, it's a well that fills from within. It means our youth have a reason to stay, to work, to dream and to thrive, right here in Burkina Faso. That is the real impact. And that is just the beginning. Have you ever noticed how nervous the world gets when Africa starts thinking for itself? When we speak with our own voice, make decisions in our own interest, and refuse to play the roles written for us by others, suddenly we become dangerous. Suddenly there are warnings, backdoor calls, veiled threats. Not because we've done something wrong, but because we've done something different, something independent. When we signed the $14 billion grain deal with India, it wasn't just a business decision, it was a political statement. A shot across the bow of the old world order that has, for far too long, kept Africa in its place, on the sidelines, exporting raw resources and importing poverty. This deal broke that pattern, and the reaction was immediate. They said Burkina Faso is being reckless. They said President Traoré is moving too fast. But let me ask you, how long are we supposed to wait? How many decades must pass while our farmers go hungry? While our youth risk their lives crossing oceans? While our resources fuel the progress of others? While we remain behind? No, we've waited long enough. The resistance didn't surprise me. It came from exactly where I expected, from those old powers who benefited most from our dependence. From those who built entire economies on the back of Africa's raw materials, cheap labor and silence. They weren't afraid of the grain deal itself. They were afraid of what it represented: a shift, a crack in the wall, a moment where one African country stood up and said, no more. They tried to pressure us. There were phone calls. There were warnings of economic consequences, of isolation, of diplomatic reconsiderations. They sent envoys to remind us of past partnerships, of aid packages, of so-called development assistance that came with hidden costs and no real ownership. They said, be careful. But I asked them, careful for who? I did not become the leader of this country to play it safe. I did not take this position to keep us in chains that have simply been polished to look like cooperation. I came to break those chains, one by one, and when I signed that deal with India, I did so with full awareness of the backlash it would bring. Because some things are worth the fight. But here's the difference this time: we did not flinch. We stood our ground because we knew what was at stake. We knew this wasn't just about Burkina Faso, it was about every African country watching us, wondering if it's possible to reject the old way and survive, to say no to exploitation and yes to self-determination. We had to prove that it can be done, and now we have. Let me tell you something. The grain in our fields does not ask for approval. It grows because the soil is strong, because the sun shines, because the people work. That is the only permission we need, and so we moved forward with India, as a partner who respected that. Not a master, not a savior, but a partner. And yes, there was pushback, but there was also a ripple effect. Across the continent, leaders began to ask new questions. Citizens began to demand better terms. Youth began to see a new path, one where they didn't have to choose between their continent and their future. That's the power of resistance, met with resolve. The old powers still watch us, They still analyze every step we take, hoping we'll slip. But we're not walking alone, we're walking with our people, with our farmers, our youth, our mothers, our builders, our teachers, and that unity is something no foreign government can break. Let's be honest, this was never just about Burkina Faso. It was about control, about a world order where Africa was supposed to stay silent, obedient, grateful for crumbs. But we are no longer begging for a seat at their table. We're building our own, and if they don't like it, that's their discomfort, not our problem. This is what true independence looks like. Not flags and anthems alone, but ownership. Decisions made in our interest. Deals that serve our people. Strength that does not come from foreign approval, but from national unity. We are not anti-West, anti-East, or anti-anyone. We are pro-African, and that clarity terrifies those who built their empires on our confusion. They will continue to resist. They will try to divide. But the truth is, their era is ending, and ours is just beginning. So when you hear that Burkina Faso is facing pressure, remember, pressure creates diamonds, and we, the people of this land, have always been unbreakable. The world may not be ready for an Africa that thinks, acts, and builds for itself. But ready or not, we are here, and we are moving forward. What if one deal could shift the course of a continent? What if a single decision, made in the dusty corridors of Ouagadougou, could send a message louder than any speech, more powerful than any protest, more lasting than any headline? That's what the $14 billion grain agreement with India has become. Not just a deal for Burkina Faso, but a symbol for Africa. A spark in the dry grass. A signal that the African awakening is no longer a dream, it is happening here and now. This wasn't just about grain, it was about dignity. It was about standing up in a world that has told us for generations to sit down, a world where we were expected to wait for aid, wait for investment, wait for permission. But now we have stopped waiting. And when Burkina Faso stopped waiting, Africa started listening. Across the continent, this deal has started conversations that were once too dangerous to speak out loud. Leaders are beginning to ask themselves and their people, why can't we do the same? Why can't we negotiate fairer trade terms? Why can't we form partnerships on our own terms? Why must we keep living on the edge of crises, begging for crumbs from the tables of those who built their wealth on our backs? It proves that we don't need to be anyone's project. We don't need to wait for the IMF to approve our progress. We don't need permission from the old powers to rise. We need courage, unity, vision, and the will to walk forward even when the road is new and uncertain. I've spoken with my brothers and sisters in leadership across the continent, and the energy is changing. There is a fire in the hearts of African youth that no longer accepts the narrative of powerlessness. They are asking, if Burkina Faso can secure a deal that brings billions into its economy without surrendering its sovereignty, why not us? If we can feed another nation while feeding our own people, why not all of Africa? This is no longer about one country's success. It is about what our success means for the future of the entire continent. It is about giving permission, not from the outside, but from within, for African nations to act boldly, to act independently, to stop seeing borders and start seeing common purpose. This deal didn't just show what is possible, it exposed what has been withheld. For years, we were told our soil was not fertile enough, our governance not stable enough, our economies not modern enough. But now we know the truth. It was never about our ability. It was about keeping us in a place where we would never realize it. And so, when Burkina Faso stepped forward and claimed its space in the global food market, not as a charity case, but as a supplier, something changed. Something big. It gave form to a truth we've always felt in our bones, that Africa's time is not coming, it is now. I don't pretend we did this alone. The deal was forged with a partner who saw us as equals. India didn't come to dictate, but to collaborate. That kind of partnership is rare, but it is the future. It is the new model we must insist upon across all sectors: agriculture, technology, energy, trade, equal footing, mutual benefit, local ownership. Because Africa has had enough of dependency disguised as development. We have had enough of being managed like a risk instead of empowered like a force. We are not a continent of problems. We are a continent of potential, untapped, underestimated, and ready to erupt. This awakening is not loud, but it is deep. You can see it in the farmers organizing into cooperatives, in the youth launching agri-tech startups, in the leaders choosing to invest in local capacity instead of importing foreign consultants. You can feel it in the ground, in the rhythm of the markets, in the pride returning to our people. But let me be clear. A symbol is only as strong as the movement it inspires. This deal on its own is not enough. It must be replicated, adapted, scaled. It must become a new standard for African diplomacy, African economics, and African leadership. We have to believe in ourselves, not because of what the world says about us, but despite it. We have to trust that our vision is enough, our people are enough, our land is enough, because they always have been. So when people ask me what this $14 billion deal means, I don't just talk about grain exports or GDP, I talk about the shift, the change in posture, the straightening of backs across the continent. I talk about an Africa that is awakening, not to the world's expectations, but to its own power. This is not the end of the journey. It is the start of something far bigger. And to every African listening, I say this, the future is not somewhere far away. It is already here. It is in your hands, your soil, your voice. You don't have to wait anymore. We are awake now. Let the world adjust.